Grit and grace, that's how we grow. Step by step and child by child we know. There's power in the words we say. We lift the voices, light the way. Grit and grace, it's a journey we all share. For every child, everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. I'm your host, Gretchen Goettl, alongside my mother and co-host, Angela Hanlin. Today, we have a fellow podcaster with us, Miss Arti Shah, and she is going to share with us her experience as a speech language pathologist and the role that it's played in schools. All right, Mom, if you'll tell us a little bit more about Arti, that would be wonderful, and then we'll go ahead and dive in.
Gretchen, I would love to. So thank you, Artie, for being here. Artie is an educator and speech language pathologist whose work lives at the intersection, if you will, of language and literacy. Some of you may also know Artie as the host of her own podcast called Human Chapters, a podcast that elevates everyday stories and the lessons within them. We will now dig into how speech language pathologist expertise can strengthen Tier 1 instruction, teacher collaboration, and learning outcomes for all students and learners. So, Artie, we are absolutely thrilled that you are with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity.
You're welcome. We're excited. Let's dive in, Gretchen.
Yes. So before my first question, I'm going to give our viewers and listeners a little background knowledge. So my first question is, why did you decide to focus your energy on working in schools? I'm going to give some background knowledge because not everyone knows that a speech language pathologist has multiple career routes and avenues that they can take. So there are often speech pathologists that work in hospitals with stroke victims or nursing homes, retirement centers. So it's not always a clear path to education. There are some speech pathologists that's not their desire at all. So they take a completely different route. But as we know, Artie obviously chose education. So, Artie, if you will, tell us, why did you decide to focus your energy on working in schools?
Thank you for that question. It is probably one of the most important questions that I think about twice a day, if not once a day. Growing up in an Indian household in Kenya, we were always told education was one of the most important things that our parents and our grandparents would be able to give us. And growing up in a childhood where you see the good, bad, and ugly, it really does make you think, makes you observe at a very young age as to how people are treated, the inequity, the divisiveness, just everything that you don't think a child sees, but a child does see. They may not be able to articulate it, but they're observing and they're taking in so much of it. For myself, my personal journey in education wasn't very easy. At primary school, I was okay until second grade, but I really needed that explicit teaching. I loved learning, but I don't think my teachers understood how to teach me. Concepts didn't come very easily to me. Language elements didn't come very easily to me. I think I sometimes describe my brain as being almost sort of a 2D plain brain, and the reason I say that is I actually need everything broken down into its basic form, and then I can build on it. The minute I understand it, I'm able to conceptualize it, and then I'll be able to build on it and generalize information. So we didn't have speech path services. We didn't have any of those sort of services at school. We had mainstream, we had a little bit of special ed. I remember going to remedial classes because they couldn't figure me out. It was very much like, you're bright, but you're not showing this in your exams. And we had exams at the end of every term, starting in grade 3. So it was a very different educational system. So, you were ranked, all of that granted. One thing stayed, and it has been my anchor till today, which is education will open up doors. Education is extremely important and it needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
So primary school was very hard. Trying to you build your most basic concepts then, and going on to secondary school, we started doing the sciences, so biology, chemistry, physics. I could not for the life of me understand physics, so I wouldn't talk about it. But when we started all of that, they broke down the concepts to basic level, and it was a foreign language to everybody, so they really had to break it down, teach it explicitly. And for whatever reason, then high school was where I started to learn and started
Yeah.
to thrive. And biology, chemistry, and maths were probably my favorite subjects.
Mhm.
Just thinking through so many things. Again, like with everything, maths never came easily to me. I really had to work, I think, 5 times the amount of somebody else I was with, just to try and grasp those concepts. And that was the most important part for me. So then I sort of went through into the year 12. We even did till year 13 before going to
Mhm.
uni. And I was always drawn to communication in books, communication in writing, communication in the way people spoke. Um, at the age of, oh gosh, I would have been 6 years old. And I tell this story quite frequently. I have a beautiful cousin who used to lisp then. And we were in school together, same age. And she had the biggest interdental lisp, and she used to get picked on as well by kids. And at that age, I was like, no, that's not okay. We're going to work on this. You will, I'll teach you. And then, poor thing, there were ghost stories involved if we had to do some work. Oh, it was terrible. But I always, I always looked at communication in quite a tangible way.
Mhm.
Words that sounded well. What sort of who spoke what words well. And I
Yeah.
always saw the educated people, or that was my observation. And now I think back to it. And that's the reason why education is so important, is it opens doors and it gives you access to life. And so when I did become a speech path, before working in schools, I worked in a few different areas. I worked with children with disability before they went to school. I
Mhm.
worked for a little bit in a hospital setting, in a community clinic setting. And then my longest job has been in working at schools. I think it's because it is where a lot of your trajectories are set.
Yeah.
It is where a lot of learning happens that sets long-term foundations. And
Mhm.
that to me made sense with my struggles, but also, no, it wasn't so much about overcoming them. It was about understanding it and intrinsically feeling the need and the responsibility to work in a space that allowed others to be educated.
Yes, I love that.
That,
Yeah.
and what you just described, Artie, is the power of explicit instruction. And
Mhm.
Mm,
what explicit instruction, the gift that it is to all learners. Because, yes, some students desperately need it, but it benefits all students. All
yeah.
students helps them learn.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, so Artie, what did you first understand your role to be, and how has that morphed over the past 9.5 years?
Yeah. My understanding of a traditional speech and language pathologist in schools role was, so as you mentioned, Gretchen, before, speech paths work in so many different fields. I
Mhm.
usually tell people we can work with anyone from the day they're born till the day they pass away
Yes.
because it involves the brain, it involves swallowing, it involves communication, and that, yeah, happens through life. But when I first went into schools, I thought I was going to be working on speech sound, so the way somebody articulates the sound, and puts it into words, but language as well. So that is to do with understanding language and then being able to express language. So those parts are within the oral language sphere of our work. And I thought I could be working on fluency. Fluency for a speech path is actually to do with stuttering, an instance of stutters. So that's another area we work in, or voice, where, if you think about vocal nodules. So all of it is to do with that sort of oral communication. Um, and then I started at schools, and it was, thinking through, it's such a specialized field. So a lot of pull-out groups were happening. So it could be your tier two groups, but also, so tier one is whole class, tier two is small groups, and tier three is with individual people. And I used to work a lot at a tier two and tier three level. But at points I used to go and model to classroom teachers and for whole classes regarding, it could be how to probably enrich language if they're reading a text, what sort of questions to ask to generate a conversation. So they were very important parts of the work. But then through pull-out groups, one of the things was follow-through work, which was extremely important. And we are not magicians. We know speech paths are trained to know the area of difficulty. They're trained to know what to do in it. The thing is that we need teamwork within that because it's the frequency, it's the dosage, it's the times or it's the repetition that the child
Yes.
actually receives that makes the biggest difference a lot of the time. And so I could be at a school once a week, once a fortnight, and so due to the high caseloads, to actually see every child every week may or may not be possible. It might be possible for a term. In Australia, we have 4 terms per school year, and or it might not be possible. So then, if it's reduced, then who is working with the child and what are they doing? And actually, are they likely to improve if there is less work being done with the child in the area that they need or they're struggling in? So I used to look at my students, and initially I did. It was so fun. We used to do science experiments, and it was all to build in social. Well, part of it was social language, part of it was oral language. We were following instructions, we were building their vocabulary, we were building the sequencing, what needs to happen first, what needs to happen second. So, all of that, while I think about it now and I go, oh, what was the place for that? It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot in terms of how students actually learn how things need to be sequenced in that
Yes.
respect. So we did a lot of that. But then at the end of the day, they're in a school, their results are going to be targeted to literacy, to numeracy, to anything that they're learning at school. And I used to check in on their results, and they weren't moving. So I had to ask myself, oh, is any of this actually working for the child? We're trying to teach them skills so they can access communication, but I don't think we're yet hitting the mark as
Mhm.
speak for, and I say we, but I mean I don't think I'm hitting the mark. So I did ask one of the school teachers, and I said, please be honest with me. I'm not here for, you won't hurt my feelings if you say otherwise, but do you feel like what I'm doing at school is actually making a difference? And her answer was quite interesting. She's like, not in terms of schoolwork. We don't see a difference there. But in the sessions, they're engaged, and we see, and that's the part that perhaps they're taking away. And I was like, yeah, I'm still not okay with it though.
Mm-hmm.
And then I used to wonder, in 2017, I've kept this question that I'd written for one of my seniors at the time. The question that I had for her was, everybody's talking about language comprehension. So when a child is reading, they're not understanding what they're reading. But nobody is actually asking the question about the decoding side of things. And I didn't say decoding because in 2017, I hadn't yet come across the simple view of reading. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, nobody is talking about the reading side of it. And now I know better. It's not the word reading. But it was that decoding part. And that question stood out in every school. They're talking about language comprehension. They're talking about students not being able to understand the piece of text and not being able to follow along, but nobody's asking why that is and why one of the parts is the technical aspect of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And so that's when I started delving into that idea of literacy and language connections.
Yeah.
And for me, sort of thinking through, I started in schools in 2016. So I'll give you a bit of a timeline. In 2017, I think 1 year from when I started, that's when I started to notice, and it was blowing my mind. And I started to ask questions, but I still didn't know what to do about it. And in 2018, I started to listen to podcasts. And I think actually, Melissa and Laurie Love Literacy was one of the first education podcasts I started to listen to. And at this time, I was in Kenya, visiting family, and I was walking up the stairs, and I was like, "Yes, explicit, yes. Why aren't we doing this sort of things?" And I had a lot of light bulb moments during when I was listening to their podcasts about how it's so important that instruction is targeted, instruction is understood, instruction is broken down for our students, but to be able to do all of that, the adult needs to have that underpinning knowledge of how far to break it down. And all of that is language. We are getting students to execute tasks. They are having to understand an instruction. They are having to go through their internal self-talk. This
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm going to do. They're having to understand concepts. They are having to be able to then express themselves in the form of writing, in the form of drawing, whatever they were asked to do. And that to me is all language. And those realizations started to come between 2018, 2019, where I started to listen to podcasts, but then in 20 end of 2018, I was walking around the lake, one of the lakes at my local places, and I was listening to a podcast, and they talked about simple view of reading. I clearly remember going around the lake, going, yes, this makes sense. Why didn't, and it was like, it's so simple. And I just felt like, oh, Artie, really? Now is the time you're having these light bulb moments? What the hell? Anyway, it was a very, very special moment because then at uni we'd learned about Scarborough's reading rope,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just touched upon. And I
Yes.
hadn't actually thought about it deeply enough to go, no, we need to be using this and we need to
Yes.
be thinking through the 8 strands and how we can be working through that. And the beauty of speech and language pathology is we have the privilege at, to actually look deeply into a child, look through their profile, look through where are the areas of difficulty? And because everything is language, we then have that privilege to be able to connect the dots very quickly. So if vocabulary is difficult for the child, whether it's in their understanding or their ability to define the word or explain what it means in context, well, then vocab is in every subject. It's in literacy, it's in numeracy, it's in art, it's in whatever PE. You need to be able to
Yeah.
understand it and explain. So that was my thinking through how it changed from pull-out groups to starting to talk to teachers more and really try, and not just teachers, you call them paraprofessionals, we call them learning support officers, anybody who worked with a child, because Gretchen and Angie, their insights, I think, are incredible. Oh, Artie, this child this is the task. This is where the difficulty is. And then this is another task. This is where they're having difficulty. Those observations have been gold
Mhm.
because they've sort of helped me think through, well, why is it difficult? And what part is language? What part is executive functioning? Then I started to learn about how executive functioning and language go hand in hand, or how, the aspect of fine motor, just sort of that you pull the child into different aspects of development and then you put it back together to see how it all actually starts to work together. So that's been my observation, my experience, and those real inner shifts in thinking through, we really need to work closely and collaboratively and actively listen to who is working with the child, because we can observe and assess the kids and know where the areas of difficulty are outside the classroom. What happens in the classroom is very different, because then we have lots of language demands, lots of cognitive demands, lots of social demands, and what's happening in that actual classroom. Um, I don't know if I answered the full question, but
Yes,
You
absolutely.
did. And I
Absolutely. You
think
did.
I think what a lot you said so much there. You hit on so many things, but I think a couple of the things that you said are really going to resonate with people that, we call the show Grit and Grace, the literacy journey, because it is a journey.
Mm,
I mean, and we're all constantly learning. And when you talked about when you heard the simple view for the first time, I remember the moment, like you, I remember where I was. I remember it was Dr. Vicki Gibson explaining it. I remember, her explaining the simple view of reading in Scarborough Syrup all within the same workshop, and thinking, how on earth have I taught
mm,
almost 10 years without ever hearing about these things? And then went to this, as you know, the story about me, already went to our speech pathologist and found out she was the one in the building who had the knowledge of phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. And I, at the time, had taught grades 3, 4, and 5 and didn't have those things. But I also loved the part of your story where you became vulnerable and you
mm,
looked at the data and you reached out, and that collaboration piece that I feel is missing in so many schools, of us working together as a team and everyone's voice coming to the table for all of us to see what we're seeing in the child. But you really stopping and putting your ego aside and saying, but is what I'm doing working? Is it working? And really wanting the answer. I think if we would all just stop and say, is what we're doing working? The difference and the power it could have on the students and the learning. Sorry,
Yes, and
Gretch,
I was
I
going
got
to.
carried away.
You're fine.
Sorry.
I was going to pull some of that out as well. Artie, one reason that I think that our listeners are really going to resonate with this episode and with you is because you saw that the students weren't being as successful as they could be. And then you went out and you sought more information on your own. And I feel like that's where so many teachers are today. They're going out and they are developing themselves professionally. They're listening to podcasts. They're, doing their own research. They're reading books, trying to become better. So I loved what you said about how you realized instead of having isolated groups, you really wanted to integrate more into the classroom. My question for you is, what barriers did you face moving from isolated therapy to
Mm.
integrated support, and how did you navigate them? And I ask this because as teachers, we so often, when we hear speech therapy, we immediately go to, oh, it's going to be that 15, 20-minute pullout for that child. So how did teachers respond when you wanted to kind of, shake up the status quo?
Mm. I think I think that's to begin with, those barriers were different to what they are now. Um, at the beginning, it was being vulnerable and being very sort of thinking through, if we're going to align or integrate any practice, I actually need to know what it looks like in the classroom. So starting to have those discussions with teachers around, tell me, what do you do from 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock in the morning? How does your literacy practice work? What sort of activities do you do? What happens next? And really trying to listen to their timetables, because speech path groups were not the only ones that these students were being pulled out for. There were school-based interventions, there were other activities, other things that these students were involved in that needed time out of the classroom. Now things have changed significantly, but at that time, when I really wanted to align with what they were doing to then put into my practice, was communication with teachers, communication with anybody that was, any adult that was in that classroom helping, to go, what sort of books are you reading? Where can we put this practice? If we were doing speech sound practice, where can we embed it? Because the ultimate goal of any practice is to be able to either generalize it in conversation, generalize it or crystallize it within your understanding. You should be able to write about it, because that's what education systems are for. So to really think through, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And where could practice be implemented? And where can we find the opportunity? Because that's the other thing speech paths are really good at, is once we listen to what the schedule is, and to go, oh, yes, I see. Okay, what about this particular group? Could this work here? So problem solving and going, who could work with Johnny? Where can they work with him? What about on the yard? What about, am I still there?
You
Yes,
are.
you're here.
Yes. Go
Oh
ahead.
gosh. What about on the yard? What's happening? Just thinking through, where are the opportunities? What are we trying to work on? Where are the opportunities? Now, I make it sound simple, and it's anything but simple. Speech sounds
Right.
might be something that's a little bit more simple to think through opportunities, because you can actually listen to it when a child is speaking and go, this is where the error is. The problem that or the biggest thing that I had to navigate through is language. Receptive language is your understanding of language at a word level, at a phrase level, at a sentence level, understanding it in its literal form, understanding it in its abstract form. So like that is just really deep. And then expressive language is your output, and it's your ability to speak words, phrases, sentences, the quality of those. So how do I explain that to teachers? And where do we seek opportunities for that intentional practice?
Mhm.
And why does it matter for the child? So one of the
Speaking to
things.
Gretchen's love language
I
with all that you
know.
just said right there. I could just see her face
Yeah.
lighting up.
Receptive and expressive language. Oh my gosh, that was my favorite thing I learned about in college. I refer to it so often when I'm collaborating with other teachers. I've used those phrases in my classroom. Last year when I taught 4K, like a couple teachers had come in to do like peer observations, and they were like, we noticed that on the carpet when you were doing Haggerty, this child wasn't necessarily, reproducing or producing the language. And I was like, oh, because I was like, as far as expressive language and being able to produce those sounds, they're not there yet. They're still receiving that information. They are still understanding that.
Mhm.
And when I work with that child one on one, that's where we really get into that expressive part of language. And oh my gosh, that's just like mom's is brain research. She can just go
Yeah.
on and on and on and talk about and learn about the brain. But yes, mine is that receptive and expressive
Yeah.
language. Oh,
But then I want to couple it with that receptive and expressive with cognitive load. If
Yes.
they're finding
Yes.
it
Yes.
difficult, that's a cognitive load, right? That processing time that's required, the waiting time that's required. It's easy for me to say, just give that child 3 to 5 seconds. Those 3 to 5 seconds in the context of a classroom are the longest 3 to 5 seconds. And do we actually have the opportunity to give them 3 to 5 seconds waiting time? Where, when, how, and why? Because that could change subject to subject, right?
yeah.
So it was really about talking to teachers, talking to parents as well, talking to the support staff that were there to go, how do we work with this child? It took a number of years. It wasn't one within a few months, it was all there because I was learning at the same time. How do I explain it to teachers? How do I explain language to teachers using their language? Because we need to be able to meet somewhere and they need to be able to resonate with that understanding to do something about it. If you don't resonate with something, you'll either forget about it very quickly or it's difficult to do something about it. So it came to a point of, okay, what stories are you reading to your class? What types of questions are you asking? What does that planning look like? And that was where we were very, like, there was fantastic conversation in terms of vocabulary, the types of questions, what do we want children, what do you want children to talk about? What sort of themes are you going to elaborate on? And they were no longer just stories. Now they were stories with conversations, with actually taking students' experience on board and going, oh, they might have this to contribute. They might have this to contribute. So I think the biggest barrier was just learning from teachers, learning from support staff, learning from what they do in schools to then go, oh, now can I show you something? But come into this space where I'm working with the child. Can we work with the child you have difficulties with to train you up in how to best work with the child? So there was lots of modeling, lots of scaffolds, lots of, oh, I don't know. I have to go back. I have to learn about it. And then I promise I will get back to you um, in a couple of days or the next time I'm here. Let's talk. So that's been something I've carried through with me. I suppose part of my belief is that we're all lifelong learners. No matter what our profession, what our status, we don't know everything about everything. It takes a lot of deep learning and a lot of deep observation, a lot of deep listening. And that's the real PD. Our students, our PD, our educators, our support staff, they're all part of this PD that we talk about. Um, yeah, I don't know if I've gone off on a tangent.
You're just lovely. And if
Yes.
we all approached it from that aspect and that humility and that the lifelong learning piece. And when you said that you would look at them and say, I don't know. And I tell people all the time, and Artie, we've discussed this before, the two of us, it's okay to not know, but it's not okay to not continue to learn, to,
Mm.
dig and get the answer. But ladies, as she was going through that, this idea came to my mind, and I want to like catch it. And so then we'll actually stick to it. Future podcast episode. We ought to all take a snippet of our favorite text and just tear it apart together and model the
Yeah.
questions you need to pull out and the language. And are you guys in? We've got
Yes.
to do that.
Yes, I'm like such a nerd that I'll probably cry when I read mine
I
because
love to do it, but we've
yeah,
got to do it. It's those rich, rich, rich
yeah.
language discussions. Oh, Artie, please keep going. Everything you're saying is just beautiful. Beautiful.
It's
Oh,
so beautiful. Yes, and
Yeah.
so for our next question, how can SLP, so speech language pathologist services, strengthen the language side of the simple view of reading?
yeah. I think so. We talked about language in terms of receptive language, in terms of expressive language. Now I'll talk about language. Oh, we also broke it down into words, phrases, sentences, paragraph, or now we're starting to get into discourse, paragraph, multiple paragraphs, full text.
Mhm.
And that depends chapter to chapter, one page article, doesn't matter what the text is. I'm thinking about the simple, in conjunction with the simple view of reading, I'm thinking about Scarborough's reading rope. So the elements of background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. One of the things that I would love to put out to everybody is actually we know the titles, we know the names of the strands, but I would like to ask, do we know what it actually means? Do we know what background knowledge means in some depth? Do we know what language structures means in some depth? Vocabulary, I think a lot of people understand it, but it's these others that they overlap, but they also have separate meanings. Now, where I see speech pathologists working through the language comprehension part is actually understanding the depth of each of these strands. And again, this isn't for everyone. And by understanding the depth, I also mean that we also understand what we don't know. So therefore, we can go and seek out and go, oh, language structures, syntax, semantics. I don't know this part about syntax, so I really need to go and learn about it, think through the practice. Because of the speech path training at university, a lot of it was to do with language, language as a whole, language deconstructed to its simple elements and then reconstructed. And
Mhm.
because of that, we're able to then go, this is what we don't know, this is what we need to learn, and let's see, based on that learning, where we can apply it. So, to then build on your question, we would be talking to teachers. And when I'm talking to a teacher about a text, I might be asking questions like, okay, tell me about the vocabulary that you're going to plan through. Tell me about the discussions. But the reason for those almost simplistic, simplified questions is they're not simple by any means, but this is the model I'm going through. Have we got background knowledge? Have we got vocab to the depth we need? Are we targeting sentence structures within it? So a big part of my conversations with teachers has been and continues to be, and it will be for a long time, is how do we know which sentences are quite complex for these students? And why would we think that they are complex? What makes us say that? But we do have tools now that help us break it down to, phrases. Complex sentences or sentences that are difficult for others to understand could be passive sentences with many embedded clauses, sentences, there were two sentences with subordinating conjunctions. And there was one more that I can't, or negation sentences when we say it is not. And actually, that's the one I have difficulty understanding. A lot of the times I need to rephrase it. Wait, what are they saying? It's not, and they've said something else. But talking through having that concept of the rope or simple view of reading, determining the questions I ask, to the conversation and the planning and the resources that could potentially be used. And that comes with modeling, that comes with mistakes, and actually going, oh, that was a mistake, but I'll tell you why. So if I make a mistake, I love to point out mistakes for myself because it's a great way for me to reflect on it, talk about why it was a mistake, and actually help others understand. Oh, I see. Like this was a mistake because I did this, and actually that order was too difficult for the child to follow. So I should have rephrased it and I should have gone simple first and then complex. Next time I'll do that. So,
And I think so many teachers and educators, it's not teachers. When let me say I made a mistake because I misspoke there. And I'm just saying educators in general. Now that I've been consulting full time now for a year, not only do they not know, we still have people that don't know about the simple view and Scarborough's rope and those components that you're speaking of. But like, let's take syntax and semantics. I've had teachers, and I'm so glad they felt able and
mm,
vulnerable and comfortable enough to say, I don't even know the definition of
mm,
that, let alone how to go teach it. And so
mm,
to all listeners, and especially our leaders in schools, what you're talking about, Artie, this is the type of true collaboration and
mm,
professional learning opportunities we need in our school, because this is that rich type of
mm,
collaboration that we can come together as educators and do and learn from each other, because we have so many people that don't know, and they don't know, like what you're describing, they don't know what questions to ask to
mm,
elicit these responses out of the student, and they don't know, okay, even if I understand what that is, do I know how to implement it in my classroom? And it's a learning opportunity, I think, for all of us.
Yes, and I just want to say, Mom, one of the things I feel right now in our schools, people have become so absorbed and so wrapped up in phonemes and graphemes. And they don't
mm,
realize that the next logical step is to understand semantics and syntax
mm,
and morphology. We can't just have, I feel like we're so guilty as teachers of being like, oh, well, this is what I need to know as a K2 teacher. Oh, this is what
mm,
I need to know as a 3-5 teacher. No, you need to
mm,
know all of it. You need to have that, that wide, just broad understanding of all of these different things, especially now when we are seeing so many learning gaps and you have a child in third or fourth grade that doesn't have basic understanding. Well, you need to know how to, like Artie has said, to really break down that language and take it to the level that they need. And I feel like that is just truly, that's one of the things that we're missing out, is we've become so isolated into our grade level and into our content that we have lost some of that vertical collaboration. We're doing a lot of great things horizontally, but we've
mm.
really lost the power of those vertical conversations.
We stay in
And
our own like separate silos, and we've got to break that apart. Yeah.
just a couple of things that I wanted to add in terms of this collaboration, it's also being able to have a team. So where I work, we have a team of 7 to 8 speech pathologists at any one time, but they're all at different schools. And to actually be able to talk to other speech paths, talking through open, I say openly and honestly about what we are finding, but that also takes time to cultivate. That also takes time because everybody wants to be able to protect and defend their work. And that's the reason why we're employed where we're employed to be able to, you know, educate others, sort of a thing. But if we're then going, oh, but how does this work? We need to have that safe space to be able
Definitely.
to learn together, to problem solve. And that's something that I'm so grateful for at my workplace. But also, the other thing that helps me think through a lot about language is I I would say English is my first language. I think in it. I do everything. It's my strongest language. But Gujarati is my Indian mother tongue.
Mhm.
I I look, speak it, I understand it very much at a conversational level, but I also read it and I can write it. Again, I would say maybe a grade 2, grade 3 level, but that's the other language. And then growing up in Kenya, the third language was Swahili, which is the national language there. I can understand it, but I cannot speak it. Most of my cognitive resources growing up was spent on English because for us, at the time, and this is now what I understand, that superiority of languages, which it shouldn't be, but everything was in English to be able to study, to be able to do this. So it is so sad at the moment to think through. I could have put in some cognitive resources towards Swahili and Gujarati, and it has so many sort of different advantages and benefits to it. But that's something that I think through a lot is when I break down language, it's that brain that's working that has other languages and going, oh, I would break it down this way. I would break it down this way. But I also then understand if it's somebody that's speaking one language, well, that's different and that's challenging as well. How do you break it down enough? How do you know that that is enough? And if it's not enough, then what is the further breakdown to that to get somebody else to understand it? And that has been probably one of the questions that hasn't been answered for me through research, through PD. How do people break language down
Mhm.
with what they know?
I have probably 10, like about 10 to 15 more minutes left. I could do this for a
Hours.
whole nother hour. Yeah, if not more. So Gretchen, really kind of like zero in on some of the things that you really want to bring out in the last, because as you can see, she's a wealth. Artie is
Yeah.
a wealth of information. I know. We might have to do a to be continued episode.
Yes, I was actually just thinking the same thing. I mean, actually, Mom, I'm going to flip that back to you, and I'm going to have you choose the next few questions as we wrap up for, what you really think is the most important to bring out, because I'm currently, working in one school, you're working in many. So what do you think, is going to go the farthest, make the greatest impact? What do you think people really need to hear?
One of the things I want to ask you, Artie, is I know that you do so much work to really work with educators. So what is one message that you wish all educators could hear? If you could get
Oh gosh.
something out, I know that's a big question, but what is a message that you really wish in your heart that all educators could hear?
Um, my biggest one is understand the models of reading. There are a few different ones. What does each one, what's the message for each one? So we have the simple view of reading. We have, so Scarborough's reading rope isn't a model, it's a metaphor, but that's expanded on the simple view of reading. We have Young Suk Kim's Dear, direct and indirect effects of reading. I think that's another model that includes executive function elements within it. And the fourth one is the active view of reading. That, but thinking through what are these models? Because there's usually that concept whenever there are assessments, whenever a child is presenting with something, that might just be, I think, something that I think through. Where is that breakdown and what is allowing me to understand that breakdown? And models and frameworks, metaphors do this beautifully, is they give you that sort of concept you can lean on to go, where is the breakdown? And you don't have to know everything about everything. Just understanding the base of what they're trying to tell you will allow you at some stage to go deeper into it.
Mhm.
And thinking through where do you get your learning from? It doesn't always have to be a book. It can be, you can be listening to podcasts. And in fact, that is something that I really, there are so many beautiful podcasts out there. That's where I get a lot of my learning because it's a conversation between two people. So it's that toing and froing, and it gets you to think about students you're working with. And because the nature of it is conversational storytelling, it makes it easier to hold on to that information and think through how you would be able to apply it. So where are you sourcing that learning from would be my next question to everybody. Where are you sourcing your learning from and why do you want to learn a little bit more?
Okay, thank you for that. So, in all of your work, what is the thing, kind of your why, that motivates and inspires you to stay the course, continue to learn more, and really continue to do the work that you are so passionately doing right now?
Equity. Everybody should have a chance to understand themselves and be able to express themselves and know that they're valuable in the world. And education could potentially provide that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like
you
being
need a round of applause. That made me tear up. Oh,
so
Artie.
beautiful.
So we love to ask the question. So I've always trainings or just any discussion I've led, I've always said, along your literacy or educational journey, what are your aha moments? And now I have Angela Hanlin and Associates, AHA, the consulting company. And so now we also love to ask people about their aha moments in education because I feel that other people can learn from those. And it too, it really is an example of what you were talking about earlier. We really do all as educators need to see ourselves as lifelong learners and that this is a journey. It's not a one and done, and we don't know it all. So what are maybe one or a few of your aha moments that have really kind of been pivotal in your journey?
The marriage between language and literacy is probably my first aha moment in that it's not a new realization. It's drawing on familiar, it's drawing on the past, just in my childhood. It's drawing on the present, my learning, and it will, and that sort of future where we will continue to see the depth between language and literacy, language and numeracy. Language is transcend, like it transcends through everything. That's how
Yes.
that's how we communicate. It's how we think. It's how we get our needs met. And whether it's in terms of speaking or it's in terms of using sign language, that communication is there. Using an augmentative and alternative device, communication device to get your message across. That so language, there's recently a big Sky conference, language is everything. That has been so grounding and so affirming to this. My second aha moment, and I shared this one with Angie a while ago, has been around instructions. And it's been an instruction is a sentence. It has a noun and a verb in it. If a student is unable to understand that instruction, is it that they can't understand the concept that's embedded within the instruction? Or is it that they don't know the steps? Or is it both? And and that allows us to think through, well, how else can we get the student to understand? Do they need a lot more teaching, a lot more practice, more modeling? Yeah, getting through. How do we break down the instruction?
And you've talked about too, we've had conversation in the past about looking at that learning standard. And is
Yes.
it the skill that they're struggling with
Yeah.
or the level of the learning of that skill? Do they know the skill, but do they not know, that verb, determine, identify, evaluate? So can they determine the theme, but then can they write about the theme or can they analyze the theme? And why is this theme of this story different from another one?
Yes.
Yes. And I've heard you
Oh,
talk
and
about
one
that
more.
and you're brilliant. Go ahead. No,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Now, this is something, actually, I would love your brains for this. Something that I really think through, and I would love, I don't know, sometimes I do try to put it in my explanations, but it's to do with vocabulary. In the English language, we use words for what they mean literally, but we then move their meaning to something abstract, something representative.
Yes.
The word blue is the blue sky, or it could express a feeling of sorts, but the Monday blues, or a sense of some sadness as well. So going through literal to abstract. And how many words do we have in English and connected words and families? And that's been one of my things that I think through is we talk about literal language and we talk about abstract language in isolated terms. But actually, if we look through the connective points, a lot of literal meanings are then changing to an abstract representation. And that's, yeah. I don't know if that even makes sense or
It
it's,
does.
yeah.
It does.
Well, and I think of like I taught fifth grade the majority of my career in figurative language. And so even if like in a hyperbole or an idiom or a simile or metaphor, and that's part of Scarborough's rope. I mean, even the examples, it lists metaphor and, that figurative language piece there. And so students might understand the individual words, but when you put those in that figurative language, they lose the meaning. And then they're not going to fully grasp the author's intention and purpose of using that simile, metaphor, whatever, the way they did in that paragraph. And I think sometimes as educators, we don't think we have time to drill down and really talk about those things and break that language down in that sentence and in that text. And I feel like we don't have time to not do
Mm.
it, because then we are truly impacting the child's comprehension. Gretchen, you're probably dying to add to that.
Oh, it makes me think of one of my favorite things to teach, and this is what really makes me miss teaching middle school and high school, having those conversations about symbolism, because that's really what we're talking about here. Like, especially when she brought up the color, in the word blue,
Mm,
the color, but then how does that color make you feel? So how can we then take that word and alter it and use it to show feeling? And that was always one of my favorite thing in a text. And because it goes back to when we're talking about figurative language, when we're talking about symbolism, all that goes back to author's craft. And why is the author manipulating and choosing to use these words? And like, I think of the authors of old, F. Scott Fitzgerald and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and every single word that they used was intentional. And that just goes to show the power of language, and that language is something that it can be manipulated. What do you want these words to mean? What do you want these words to represent? And how do you make that happen? So it's a very complex skill that we're talking about here, because it really comes down to each specific text and each author, and what is the purpose, and why is the author forming the sentences this way? Do we have compound sentences? Do we have complex sentences? And why? And it's just, oh my gosh, I love talking about these things, because not only, like, I feel that language is beautiful. Language is beautiful to listen to. For me, language is beautiful to read. I'm an avid reader, but it's also beautiful for me to sit back and think about, okay, as a person, when I'm speaking, why did I use this specific word or phrase?
mm,
This text that I'm reading, why did this author use this specific word, this specific phrase? And what do you want your reader or your listener to take away from that conversation? It all comes down to your word choice.
mhm.
Uh,
So, Artie, I cannot thank you enough for your time
Thanks.
tonight. And you are like almost a day ahead of us. But thank you so much for taking your time. It's one day of the week where you're at and another day where we're at. I find that so fascinating. And thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. And I just love you as a human,
yes.
and as an educator, because you're just lovely in both aspects. But thank you for all that you're doing to really try to push these discussions and really get other educators to learn as well. And you're so passionate about that. And you have a beautiful, humble way of doing that and bringing people together. So thank you for your work and your presence in the literacy world and in the world of education and all that you do. Do you have any final parting thing before I hand it over to Gretchen to close this just lovely, that's the word I'm going to choose to use, lovely episode and discussion that we've had with you? Do you have any final thing you'd like to say?
I'm so deeply grateful for the opportunity to talk about language, to talk about its importance. I'll rephrase it, communication. Um, it is it is so important. It helps us to understand one another. It helps us to have compassion and kindness for everybody in this world, because we know it's anything but an easy place. And to understand each other's stories allows us to find wisdom and truths in our own stories. So, no,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And just a plug, if you've not listened to Artie in her episodes of Human Chapters and what she pulls out of people's stories, I have goosebumps right now, even saying it. They're beautiful to listen to. So just a plug for if listeners, if you haven't heard that, that's another podcast for you to dig into and really see the discussions and the conversations that she's had with people. All right, back to you, Gretchen.
I just want to say for just a second, I feel like viewers, listeners, that was partially a plug for me because she thinks my true crime podcast give me anxiety. And Artie's voice is so peaceful. I can see her being like, now see, Gretchen, this is a podcast that you can listen to in the morning when you get ready to be inspired and just move throughout your day. But
Gretchen, that's what Artie's episodes do for my life. So I didn't mean that, but I will take the opportunity to say, yes, you are correct, my dear. She would have that effect on you. Yes, she
so
would.
Artie, I will be throwing human chapters into my morning routine now.
Right.
But so as we close today, I really want to pull out two words that Artie mentioned in today's episode: communication and equity. And in my mind, those two words go together because how can you have one without the other? And, a lot of times when I leave these episodes, I feel like fired up and like, let's go set the world on fire and do this and do that. But in today's episode, I just feel a sense of peace that we have an answer. Not only do we have an answer for literacy, but we have an answer in how to move forward in our lives and how to move forward in our world and how to create people that can move forward and can have positive conversations and can have an impact and can see the best in everyone and live their lives where each day they fight for equity for themselves, but they also fight for equity for others. And if we give our children the ability to speak and the ability to listen, how beautiful would our world be?
Yeah.
And truly, it's one of those moments like I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Like the song. I think to myself, what a wonderful world. What a wonderful world it would be if we could communicate and if we could feel and provide that sense of equity for our students that could then grow up to be adults that did the same for others. So, listeners, I hope you take this episode from today and I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel motivated, but I hope that you also feel at peace and that you go back into your classroom, into your grade level, into your school, and you're really thinking about what is best for everyone right now. What is best for my students? What is best for my coworkers? What is best for my administrator? And how can I communicate with those people around me to make this a positive, a safe, and equitable environment for all? So with that, I will remind you, this is Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. I hope that you are doing well. I know almost everyone's back in school at this point, and I hope your school year is off to a wonderful start, and we will see you next time.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
Grit and grace, that's how we grow. Step by step and child by child we know. There's power in the words we say. We lift the voices like the way. Grit and grace, it's a journey we all share. For every child,